The Bible is very specific in how it describes that event. The Hebrew wording there is the walls, takatha, fell beneath themselves. And on the seventh trip around, we're told in the Bible, the mud brick wall collapsed and it fell outward and down to the base of the stone retaining wall.
The ancient city of Jericho has walls that have stood for over 10,000 years, steeped in legends that could change history. Since 8000 BC, Jericho has been a center of early civilization with fertile land and big walls that protected the city from many dangers. Researchers are still amazed by the discovery of what happened when Joshua's troops marched around its walls for 7 days, leading them to crumble. What hidden details is this old legend holding under the Sahara Desert? Let's explore Jericho's long-lost stories. The dual ancient forces shaping Jericho. The biblical story describes how the walls of Jericho fell after Joshua and the Israelites encircled the city for 7 days, ending with the sound of trumpets. This account is a cornerstone of Judeo-Christian traditions, but remains a topic of intense debate among archaeologists. Research by Kathleen Kenyon and John Garstang indicates that Jericho underwent multiple destruction phases, potentially predating the biblical timeline of around 1400 before Christian era for Joshua's conquest. Kathleen Kenyon's thorough examinations particularly pointed out the absence of Cypriot pottery expected from the late Bronze I period, suggesting an earlier date of ruin. Further excavations revealed numerous habitation layers, indicating that Jericho was rebuilt multiple times. Around 2600 before Christian era, the Amorites constructed robust fortifications, and by about 1900 before Christian era, Canaanites took over the city, initiating a significant growth phase driven by the ascendancy of chariot-utilizing elites known as Marianu. Despite formidable fortifications, there is evidence of considerable destruction, likely caused by an earthquake around 1573 before Christian era, followed by a prolonged period of abandonment. This aligns somewhat with subsequent biblical accounts, although the exact historical accuracy remains under discussion. The biblical depiction of Jericho's walls might merge actual historical events with theological symbolism to illustrate divine intervention. The walls of Jericho represent a vital chapter in both ancient and scriptural history, encapsulating tales of conquest and divine acts. From an archaeological viewpoint, Jericho is recognized as one of the initial walled cities, with defenses dating back approximately to 8000 before Christian era. These early fortifications were not solely for protection, but also signified the city's importance as a hub for social and economic activities, especially given its advantageous location near fertile zones by the Jordan River, supported by natural springs. According to the biblical narrative, the walls of Jericho collapsed when Joshua and the Israelites, following divine orders, surrounded the city for a week, with the final day marked by the blowing of trumpets and a collective shout from the people. However, archaeological inquiries present a more detailed scenario. Excavations have exposed a series of settlements and fortifications at Jericho, including evidence of a significant destruction layer dating to around 1550 before Christian era, much earlier than the traditional biblical date of around 1400 before Christian era for the conquest by the Israelites. This has led some scholars to suggest that the story in the Bible may amalgamate memories of multiple events or symbolic storytelling rather than documenting a specific historical incident. In-depth archaeological investigations, notably by Kathleen Kenyon and later by other researchers, have shown that the city's walls were indeed formidable, comprising a stone retaining wall topped by a mud brick wall. These findings correlate with some descriptions in the biblical account, suggesting that the walls could have collapsed under themselves, possibly due to an earthquake, as evidenced by layers of fallen bricks found at the base of the retaining walls. The narrative of the walls falling and the subsequent conquest of the city has also been interpreted as a theological symbol in the biblical text, intended to demonstrate the power of faith and divine intervention. This event profoundly influenced the ancient Near East, instilling a sense of awe and fear among neighboring regions toward the Israelites' God. The story of Jericho remains a captivating blend of history, archaeology, and religious tradition, reflecting both the city's actual past and its legendary role in biblical lore. Each layer of excavation at Jericho adds depth to our understanding of this ancient city, which served both as a real urban center and a powerful symbol in religious narratives. What secrets did the pillars of cloud and fire hold for the Israelites in the desert? The divine pillars in the Israelite Exodus. In ancient writings from the Bible, there are intriguing accounts of the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night, which reportedly aided the Israelites during their trek through the desert after leaving Egypt. These phenomena are said to have had two primary functions. At night, the pillar of fire illuminated the vast, desolate desert, providing warmth and light during the chilly darkness. Delve deeper into these accounts. Imagine yourself navigating a desert, and suddenly above you looms a massive cloud providing shade from the brutal sunlight. It's like having a portable shade bestowed upon you by a supreme entity. And when dusk descends, instead of stumbling in complete darkness, a blazing pillar lights up the sky, guiding your path like a beacon. Yet, some might question these tales. It's unusual for clouds to offer shade in such a manner, and a pillar of fire seems more apt to ignite a blaze than to light a path. These stories might seem implausible, right? Nevertheless, these narratives are fundamental to ancient beliefs and customs. These phenomena were seen as clear indicators of divine aid and protection for the Israelites making their way through harsh desert conditions. Consider also the deeper significance of these events. In a vast desert lacking clear landmarks, the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire provided both direction and a sense of purpose, acting as signals guiding the Israelites toward their promised land. Despite contemporary science and skepticism, the tales of the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire continue to be shared today, captivating the minds of many. They serve as reminders of the strength of belief and the mysteries of the divine. Those who believe in these stories hold on to them fervently, viewing them as manifestations of divine intervention intended to guide and protect the chosen people during their arduous journey. For these believers, the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire symbolize real signs of divine care and comfort, offering solace and support amid the hardships of desert life. However, even among the faithful, some might speculate whether these supposed miracles were merely natural occurrences exaggerated into legends over time. Clouds do cast shadows, and fire provides heat. Perhaps the Israelites observed these natural phenomena and attributed supernatural significance to them. Despite any doubts, the stories of the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire endure, interwoven into the fabric of religious traditions and legends. Whether regarded as genuine miracles or merely allegorical tales, these narratives continue to inspire and provoke thought about the interplay between faith, mythology, and human creativity. In these ancient texts, the pillar of cloud during daylight hours and the pillar of fire at night frequently appear, functioning like divine navigation aids, guiding the Israelites through the wilderness. By day, it is recounted that God led the Israelites with a cloud that shaded them, providing a direction. When night fell, this cloud transformed into a fire, lighting up and warming the desert night. The imagery is vivid, isn't it? But there's more. The scriptures mention that the cloud also kept the Israelites and Egyptians apart, blending darkness with light to prevent their convergence. It acted like a celestial barrier. Here's another intriguing aspect. An angel from God is said to have been present within this cloud and fire, leading the Israelites like a divine guide. It's akin to having a GPS, but with a touch of heavenly assistance. Depending on a cloud for navigation might seem unlikely, right? Moreover, God is believed to have used this cloud to communicate, delivering instructions and messages like a divine announcer. Picture hearing God's voice coming from a cloud. It's a peculiar and fascinating concept. No matter the skepticism, these accounts describe the cloud and fire as constant companions throughout the Israelites' travels, functioning like a personal meteorological service that doesn't predict rain but signals divine assistance. Quite handy, right? It's like hosting a celestial visitor who stays a bit too long. Yet, it's very useful for knowing when it's time to move on. Ready to see how the 10 plagues of Egypt shook an ancient empire? The biblical plagues that redefined Egypt. The 10 plagues of Egypt, as detailed in the book of Exodus, are described as a sequence of devastating events utilized by God to assert his supremacy over the Egyptian gods and to free the Israelites from enslavement. Each plague specifically confronted various Egyptian deities, highlighting their ineffectiveness in comparison to the God of Israel, thereby reinforcing his might and authority. The first plague involved turning the Nile River into blood. This was particularly significant as the Nile was revered by the Egyptians and associated with several of their gods, notably Hapi, the deity responsible for the Nile's flooding, which was crucial for agriculture. This event directly challenged the belief in the divine sanctity and life-giving essence of the Nile. When the waters transformed into blood, the river, Egypt's lifeline, turned into a source of death instead of sustaining life. This led to the death of fish and made the water undrinkable, severely affecting daily life and ritual practices. This transformation was depicted not merely as a miracle, but as a direct command and display of power from God, emphasizing that the Israelites should be freed from their bondage to serve him. The complete alteration of the Nile's waters into blood affected all water sources across Egypt, amplifying the severity of the plague. The ordeal lasted a week, during which the Egyptians faced extreme difficulties due to the lack of potable water. They were forced to dig near the Nile for fresh water and had to rely on rainwater or water stored prior to the plague. Even Egyptian magicians who managed to replicate this phenomenon could not reverse it, further hardening Pharaoh's resolve against releasing the Israelites. The narrative of this plague serves multiple purposes. It acted as a punishment for Pharaoh's stubbornness and symbolically reversed the Nile's role from a life provider to a bringer of death. It also underscored a theme of divine retribution, mirroring the punishment fitting the crime, as the Egyptians had previously drowned Hebrew infants in the river. The second plague involved frogs, associated with Heket, a goddess revered in Egyptian mythology for fertility and childbirth, and often depicted with a frog's head. This plague saw frogs invade every aspect of Egyptian households, creating chaos and discomfort. The abrupt death of these frogs left rotting heaps throughout Egypt, exacerbating the distress among the Egyptians. This was seen as divine judgment specifically against the worship of Heket, undermining the Egyptians' religious beliefs and showcasing the supremacy of the God of Israel. Heket's role in Egyptian spiritual life was significant, often involved in matters of birth and the regeneration process. She was also associated with the mummification process, representing the transformative cycle of life and death, further underscoring her importance in the transition to the afterlife. The third plague in the Exodus narrative involved gnats or lice that emerged when Aaron, under divine instruction through Moses, struck the dust of the earth with his staff. This act transformed the dust into swarms of pests across Egypt. This particular plague demonstrated God's control over even the smallest elements of the natural world and acted as a divine judgment against Set, the Egyptian deity linked with the desert, chaos, and storms. This infestation significantly impacted both humans and animals, causing considerable discomfort. The gnats or lice were described as particularly virulent, perhaps more aggressive than typical lice, underscoring their supernatural origins. Notably, this plague stumped the Egyptian magicians, who could not replicate the phenomenon, leading them to declare, "This is the finger of God." This acknowledgement marked a critical turning point, highlighting the limits of Egyptian magic and the presence of a higher power at work. The fallout from this plague was significant, shaking the foundations of Egyptian religious and magical practices and showcasing the futility of Pharaoh's resistance against the God of Israel. Pharaoh's advisors were shown to be powerless, and despite the overwhelming signs of divine power, Pharaoh's heart remained hardened, refusing Moses' demands for the Israelites' freedom. The fourth plague brought swarms of flies, causing extensive distress across Egypt and specifically targeting Pharaoh and his subjects. This plague carried deeper spiritual implications, directly challenging Wachit, the Egyptian deity associated with flies. Unlike the previous plagues, this one spared the Israelites, particularly those in the land of Goshen, highlighting divine protection and reinforcing God's selectiveness in meting out judgment. This distinction was a clear demonstration of God's power not only to the Egyptians, but also provided reassurance to the Israelites of their special status under God's protection. These insects, likely a mix of various biting bugs, added to the physical misery by threatening health and hygiene, pushing Pharaoh to make temporary concessions to alleviate the suffering. This plague emphasized the profound implications of divine intervention in forcing political and spiritual change. The fifth plague struck a direct blow to the Egyptian economy and its religious foundations by killing off the livestock, a critical resource. This plague targeted deities like Hathor and Apis, who were intimately connected with livestock and fertility in Egyptian mythology. Hathor, depicted often with cows' horns, symbolized motherhood and fertility, while Apis, represented as a bull, embodied strength and virility. The selective destruction of Egyptian livestock, while sparing that of the Israelites, underscored a clear message of divine preference and protection, reinforcing the Israelites' special status among the nations as God's chosen people. This selective mortality among livestock underscored the divine power at play, distinguishing between Egyptian and Israelite properties, and delivering a substantial economic and spiritual blow to Egypt. The loss of livestock disrupted daily life and challenged the authority and protective power of Egyptian deities, further diminishing Pharaoh's resolve and showcasing the comprehensive power of the God of Israel. The sixth plague, as recounted in the book of Exodus, involved Moses and Aaron casting soot into the air, which then transformed into fine dust, spreading across Egypt, causing painful boils to erupt on the skin of both people and animals throughout the country. This was notably the first plague to directly compromise the physical health of the Egyptian population and their livestock, marking a significant intensification in the severity of the plagues. This affliction of boils was more than a mere physical ailment. It posed a direct challenge to Egyptian deities associated with health and healing, such as Sekhmet and Sunu. Sekhmet, often represented as a lioness, was revered not only as a warrior goddess, but also as a deity capable of both inflicting and curing diseases. The failure of these gods to prevent or cure the boils highlighted their lack of power when confronted with the might of the God of Israel. Additionally, the Egyptian magicians, who had previously been able to mimic the effects of Moses and Aaron's miracles, found themselves equally afflicted and powerless against the boils. Their incapacity to present themselves before Pharaoh due to their afflictions served as a poignant symbol of the absolute dominance of God's will over both the royal court of Pharaoh and the pantheon of Egyptian deities. The seventh plague brought hail intermixed with fire, an unprecedented natural disaster targeting deities like Nut, the sky goddess, Osiris, the god of crop fertility, and Set, the god of storms. This devastating combination caused widespread destruction across Egypt's agricultural landscapes, annihilating crops such as flax and barley that were ready for harvest, while sparing the later ripening wheat and spelt. This selective destruction showcased not only the calculated precision of the divine intervention, but also its formidable power. Miraculously, the area of Goshen, where the Israelites resided, was left unscathed by the hail. This underlined the distinction between the Egyptians and the Israelites and reaffirmed the protective grace bestowed upon them by their God. Pharaoh's initial reaction to this plague was to acknowledge his wrongdoing and recognize the righteousness of the God of Israel. However, his heart soon hardened once more, leading to a continuation of his resistance against the release of the Israelites. This cycle of repentance, followed by renewed defiance, underscores a recurring theme of human obstinacy and the profound spiritual and moral challenges inherent in these biblical narratives. The eighth plague of locusts, as recounted in the book of Exodus, brought about a catastrophic devastation of Egypt's agriculture following a prior hailstorm. This plague aimed to coerce Pharaoh into releasing the Israelites by stripping the land of all remaining vegetation, which posed a dire threat of famine. Locusts, which are notorious for their capacity to obliterate vast stretches of vegetation quickly, engulfed the landscape, leaving no trace of greenery. This event was not just a natural disaster, but also a symbolic assault on Egyptian deities associated with fertility and agriculture, such as Osiris, showcasing their inability to counter the power of the God of Israel. Pharaoh's initial response to this plague was to exhibit signs of repentance, acknowledging his transgressions and beseeching Moses to put an end to the devastation. However, once the immediate threat was lifted, Pharaoh's heart hardened once more, prompting a continuation of the divine plagues. The locusts were finally swept away by a robust westerly wind, which cast them into the Red Sea, leaving Egypt locust-free but significantly altered by the experience. This demonstrated the supreme control of the God of Israel over natural elements and underscored the futility of Pharaoh's persistent defiance. Following the locusts, the plague of darkness enveloped Egypt in a palpable darkness that lasted for 3 days. This plague was especially poignant as it directly challenged Ra, the central Egyptian sun god, who was integrally linked with Pharaoh himself. By blotting out the sun, the source of light and life, this darkness represented a profound demonstration of God's dominion over one of the most revered deities of Egypt, undermining the cultural and religious foundations of Egyptian society. The most severe of all plagues was the death of the firstborn. Striking at midnight, this disaster targeted every firstborn male in Egypt, from the households of the peasants to the palace of Pharaoh, as well as the firstborn of all livestock. This calamity was a direct challenge to Isis, the Egyptian goddess known for her protective role over children. The death of the firstborn represented not only a profound personal and national tragedy for Egypt, but also a stark symbolic judgment against the Egyptian gods, accentuating their powerlessness against the will of the God of Israel. This final plague broke Pharaoh's resolve, leading him to finally permit the Israelites to depart, though his consent came only after immense loss and suffering. The profound impact of this event led to the establishment of the Passover tradition among the Israelites, commemorating their deliverance and the divine interventions that led to their freedom. This series of plagues, escalating in intensity and specificity, ultimately illustrates themes of liberation, divine justice, and the overpowering manifestation of God's will against human obstinacy. Each plague served multiple purposes, demonstrating God's power, executing judgment against the gods of Egypt, and fulfilling the promise of deliverance for the Israelites, marking a pivotal moment in their history and in the biblical narrative. Let's explore the story behind the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments. The uncomfortable truths behind the Ten Commandments. The stone tablets of the Ten Commandments have captivated people's imaginations for centuries, standing as a central icon in Judeo-Christian tradition. These ancient relics, often depicted in religious art and narratives, are revered as sacred objects that encapsulate divine directives on moral conduct. Traditionally, it is believed that God presented these tablets to Moses on Mount Sinai, marking a pivotal episode in biblical history. The tablets, said to have been etched by God's hand, embody the moral foundation laid down for humanity. The intrigue surrounding the stone tablets extends across both believers and skeptics, sparking widespread discussion about their origins and the authenticity of the associated narratives. Scholars and theologians often debate the exact content inscribed on the tablets and the arrangement of these commandments, which varies slightly among different religious sects and texts. Despite these variances, the stone tablets continue to hold significant religious and ceremonial importance, symbolizing ideals of justice and morality that transcend time. Archaeologists and historians have also shown great interest in these tablets, seeking to uncover more about their historical and cultural context through various research methods. While the physical tablets, if they ever existed, might have deteriorated over millennia, their spiritual and symbolic significance remains robust in religious communities. The depiction of Moses receiving the tablets from God is a cornerstone of both Jewish and Christian theology, emphasizing the commandments' role in shaping ethical human behavior. This story underscores the relationship between the divine and its followers, highlighting the commandments as a covenant between God and the people. Throughout history, artists have portrayed the tablets in myriad forms, from intricate carvings to grand sculptures, each interpretation reflecting the cultural and temporal context of its creation. These depictions often explore themes of justice, morality, and the divine law's role in human society, influencing not only religious thought, but also secular views on ethics and law. However, the narrative of Moses receiving the tablets from God does face skepticism. Some critics argue that this story might have been embellished or even invented to lend divine authority to the commandments, thus reinforcing their influence over societal norms and laws. There is also ongoing debate about the practical relevance of the commandments today, with some arguing that these ancient laws might not adequately address the complexities of modern society. Critics suggest that adhering strictly to these rules might be more problematic than beneficial in the face of rapid technological and cultural changes. Concerns about the preservation of the tablets, assuming their historical authenticity, highlight another aspect of their legacy. Environmental factors and time may have eroded any physical evidence, complicating efforts to verify the text historically inscribed on them. Despite these challenges and debates, the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments continue to be venerated as profound symbols of ethical guidance and moral responsibility. They play a crucial role in guiding the conduct of millions, influencing decisions and lifestyles across the globe. Whether regarded as divine relics or historical artifacts, their impact on notions of right and wrong remains potent and enduring. Whether viewed as sacred objects or simply as significant historical artifacts, the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments challenge us to consider the foundations of ethical behavior and how we treat one another in society. Their legacy prompts ongoing reflection on the nature of law, morality, and human conduct. Come see how a river in the desert became a path to a promised land. The Jordan River as the ultimate gateway to promise. The Jordan River represented a physical barrier separating the wilderness from a land flowing with milk and honey, and a spiritual test of faith, a place where divine miracles were believed to have occurred. As the Israelites approached the Jordan River, they encountered a critical moment in their journey. The river stood before them as a formidable obstacle on their path to the land that had been promised to them by God. This moment marked a transition from years of wandering in the desert to finally reaching a destination filled with hope and promise. Central to this event was the Ark of the Covenant, believed to house the divine presence and the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments. According to religious texts, a miraculous event occurred when the priests carrying the Ark stepped into Jordan's waters. Normally a fast-flowing river, the Jordan stopped running, piling up in a heap far upstream, which allowed the Israelites to cross on dry ground. This miracle was seen as a profound demonstration of God's ongoing support and guidance, reinforcing the Israelites' faith as they entered the Promised Land. The crossing of the Jordan River symbolizes a significant act of faith and the fulfillment of God's promises. It also underscored the importance of obedience to divine commands, as the Israelites were reminded of God's laws contained within the ark. This event wasn't just about moving from one geographical location to another. It represented a spiritual passage and a reaffirmation of the covenant between God and His people. Today, the Jordan River continues to be a symbol of faith for many believers and a site of pilgrimage. It attracts visitors from around the world who come to see the place where, according to biblical accounts, the Israelites made their historic crossing into the Promised Land. However, the Jordan River faces numerous environmental challenges. Modern issues such as pollution, overuse of its waters, and regional conflicts have reduced its once mighty flow to a trickle in some areas, affecting its health and the ecosystems it supports. The river, which stretches about 156 miles through diverse terrain, has seen its condition deteriorate significantly, sparking concerns about its future, and calls for greater environmental stewardship to preserve its historical and spiritual significance. Thus, the Jordan River, rich in historical and religious importance, now also symbolizes the urgent need for environmental conservation and cooperative water management in a politically complex region. Its story reflects both the enduring power of faith and the pressing challenges of contemporary environmental issues. See how a golden statue tested an entire people's faith. The deep spiritual crisis sparked by the golden calf. While journeying through the harsh Sinai desert, the Israelites encountered numerous challenges that tested their faith and resolve. One of their most significant missteps, which has been discussed for generations, involved the creation of the golden calf. This event underscores the vulnerability of humans to deviate from their spiritual path and succumb to the allure of immediate satisfaction. During this critical period, the Israelites, feeling uncertain and leaderless in Moses' prolonged absence, chose to forge an idol, the golden calf. This act of idolatry was not merely a lapse in judgment, but a flagrant violation of their covenant with God, showcasing a profound spiritual crisis. They gathered their gold, melted it down, and crafted an idol, which was a stark departure from the monotheistic faith they were supposed to uphold. This incident was not only a physical act of creating an idol, but also represented a deeper moral and spiritual failing. The Israelites engaged in festivities around the golden calf, which included revelry that went against the very tenets of their faith. This celebration was an overt manifestation of their shifting allegiances, from worshiping God to venerating a man-made symbol of prosperity and security. God's reaction to this transgression was severe but justified, considering the gravity of their actions. The golden calf became a symbol not of prosperity, but of betrayal and moral failure. It served as a painful reminder of the consequences of abandoning one's faith and principles. Despite later seeking forgiveness, the damage had been done, and this event permanently marred the Israelites' spiritual journey. The episode of the golden calf also led to significant consequences for the community. Upon returning and seeing the idolatry, Moses was enraged. The tablets bearing the 10 Commandments, freshly inscribed by God, were shattered in his dismay. This dramatic act symbolized the broken relationship between the Israelites and God, a relationship that required sincere repentance and divine mercy to mend. This story has persisted through the ages, continually serving as a poignant lesson on the dangers of losing one's moral compass and the seductive power of idolatry. It highlights the ongoing human struggle between faithfulness and sin, between enduring adherence to spiritual law and the temptation to seek immediate gratification. The golden calf remains a powerful symbol of the necessity to stay true to one's convictions, especially in times of uncertainty and fear. In modern reflections on this narrative, the golden calf is often discussed not just in religious contexts, but also in ethical and cultural discussions, symbolizing the broader temptations that societies face when confronted with uncertainty or prosperity. It prompts a deep consideration of what it means to remain committed to core values when external circumstances challenge us. Do you think the story of the golden calf is still relevant in today's society, which often values material success over spiritual fulfillment? Like, comment, and subscribe for more discussions like this.